The fate of who controls the Senate is up in the air. All eyes are on Georgia as the Senate runoff elections unfold. A now infamous leaked phone call. A Harvard law professor weighs in on whether there was any criminal activity there. And what about all the claims of irregularities? Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's talk about the Georgia runoff elections as who controls the Senate hangs in the balance. But first, some updates. Both President Trump and Joe Biden made trips to Georgia yesterday on the eve of the Senate runoffs. Trump assured Georgians that their vote is crucial to the fabric of the nation, although allegations of voter fraud remain under investigation in the state. He says his team will not settle for a rigged election, and they are continuing to pull out evidence linked to irregularities. Trump told supporters in Dalton, Georgia, "We are still fighting it, and you're going to see what will happen." Adding, "I had 2 elections. I won both of them. It's amazing. I did much better on the second one." He added he won't concede. Trump was in the Peach State to campaign for Republicans David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler in a race against Democrats Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. He said Republicans can't allow the 2 Democratic challengers to prevail on January 5th and urged people to go to the polls. Republicans are calling to delay Wednesday's electoral vote count. State senators in Georgia say they want more time to investigate election fraud allegations. At a campaign event in Georgia, Mike Pence addressed the coming joint session in Congress. He promised it would be a chance to hear the evidence of election fraud.
You know, I know we all got our doubts about the last election. And I want to assure you, I share the concerns of millions of Americans about voting irregularities. And I promise you, come this Wednesday, we'll have our day in Congress.
But a group of Republican state senators in Georgia want to postpone the counting of electoral votes. At least a dozen have signed a letter directed to the vice president asking him for an official delay. And more senators might join. Senator Brandon Beach told the Epoch Times they want a delay of 10 to 12 days. They plan to pass the letter to Pence on Tuesday, a day ahead of the vote count. Beach says they called for the delay so they have more time to investigate and scan ballots. The senator said he has also written an individual letter to Pence as a member of the state's Judiciary Subcommittee. Beach suggested senators from other states were doing the same. Beach also said he has been inundated with calls from disenfranchised voters who suspect foul play in the election. Meanwhile, senior legal advisor to the Trump campaign, Jenna Ellis, also suggested that Pence delay certifying the votes on January 6th. Speaking on Just the News television show The Water Cooler, Ellis said what Mike Pence could do and what he should do, in fact, is to direct a question back to the state legislatures. She suggested Pence ask legislatures in the 6 contested states to say which candidate's slate of electors should be approved. And a phone call made infamous after only select parts leaked to the public. Harvard law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz says news outlets took President Trump's comments to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger out of context. On January 3rd, legacy media and social media platforms widely disseminated a leaked conference call between President Trump and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. The background to the call is President Trump's team has sued the Georgia Secretary of State for election fraud in Georgia that have gone unaddressed. President Trump's team wanted to use this call to discuss a settlement with Brad Raffensperger. Dershowitz told Just the News that Trump wasn't saying, "I want you to create the vote." He's not saying, "I want you to manufacture or concoct the votes." He added Trump has the right as a citizen and as a candidate to ask for the votes that are his to be found and counted, and to not count those cast by dead people who are out of the state. According to a transcript of the call, Trump told Raffensperger, "The bottom line is, when you add it all up and then you start adding, 300,000 fake ballots." He also made reference to allegations of election fraud in the state. "We're looking into every one of those things that you mentioned," one official told Trump on the call. "Let me tell you what we are seeing. What we're seeing is not at all what you're describing." At the end of the entire conversation, Raffensperger was adamant in claiming that there was no obvious fraud in the Georgia election, and he disagreed with President Trump's claim that he won Georgia. The Atlanta Tea Party chairwoman Debbie Dooley explained in an interview with the National File that a confidential informant provided her with information indicating that Georgian Fox, the Georgia Deputy Secretary of State, was the person who leaked the recorded phone call between President Trump and Raffensperger to the Washington Post. She also said in her tweet that Fox and Raffensperger were complicit in the recording of POTUS. David Schaefer, the Georgia Republican Party chairman, meanwhile confirmed to the National File that the leak came from Secretary of State Raffensperger's office, but could not confirm that Fox was the leaker. According to a tweet by Jack Posobiec, a veteran Navy intel officer, White House planning to refer Brad Raffensperger WAPO leak to Secret Service for an investigation under national security grounds of the Espionage Act. Now, if we go back to testimony of two witnesses provided by the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society on December 1st, it seems to show important pieces of evidence of mail-in voter fraud. The two witnesses were Jesse Morgan, a Pennsylvania driver who drove a post office truck, and Nathan Pease, a worker for a post office contractor in Wisconsin. The press conference provided a whole picture of mail-in voter fraud that injected hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of fraudulent ballots into the election system through the postal system. There are 4 core steps. The first step is to use the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to open the door to the election fraud system. Election rules were changed. Massive mail-in ballots and absentee ballots with fewer restrictions were adopted. Counting centers were consolidated in large metropolitan areas, and so on. Secondly, using the Public Citizen Information Database or Election Information Database to find people who do not vote frequently and generate a list of names and addresses for fraudulent votes. The third step is finding a group of people who would fill out a large number of ballots by using the names and addresses provided. The fourth step of the process is that hundreds of thousands of these fraudulent ballots were delivered to different states through the U.S. postal system. They would be injected into the election systems of the needy counties at the nighttime. One witness, tractor trailer driver Jesse Morgan of Pennsylvania, provided testimony. He said that on October 21st at the U.S. Postal Service Distribution Center at Bethpage, New York, his trailer was loaded with about 200,000 completed ballots with return addresses filled out. He was asked to deliver them to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, suggesting it's likely to be a legal shipment as this many completed ballots are sent across state lines. Because even if it is a mail-in ballot, except for a very limited number of military ballots, you're only allowed for people living in a certain state to vote in the state. So there should not be such a huge amount of mail-in ballots interstate. However, in Harrisburg, nobody unloaded his trailer. He was asked by a post office official to drive the ballots to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He had to drive to the Lancaster post office, unhooked his trailer at its normal place to get unloaded, and then he went home. The next day, when he arrived at the Lancaster's USPS facility, his trailer was gone. He has never seen it since. Wisconsin witness Nathan Pease also provided testimony in the press conference. According to him, in the early morning of November 4th, an order came down from the Wisconsin-Illinois chapter from USPS that 100,000 ballots went missing. The post office employees were asked to work overnight to look for them. He said it's strange because it is impossible to lose so many mail-in ballots. And how did a senior official at a remote location know that this amount of ballots had been missing? Therefore, the press conference of the Amistad Project outlined how the fake ballots were generated and injected into the election system through the U.S. Postal Service. But at the same press conference, the Amistad Project did not provide details as to where this large number of such blank ballots came from. According to the official documents of the United States Electoral Assistance Commission on how to prepare and print ballots, vendor-certified or pre-qualified printing companies have to be used for printing the ballots. Quote, your contract should include details about paper stock quality and weight, ink density, and other printing specifications. Through professional analysis of paper, ink, and security features, it is possible to identify which ballot was not printed from an officially recognized printing company. Patrick Byrne, the former CEO of Overstock, posted on Twitter on January 4th seems to point out to where these blank ballots came from and who filled them in. He said that there were ballots printed in a legitimate printing step in addition to the contracted amount. Here are his tweets. A printing shop in Michigan prints ballots for Delaware County, Pennsylvania, and as Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. But along with the ballots it prints on contract and delivers to those counties, it prints some ballots that get diverted to Bethpage, New York. There, a boiler room of folks fill in Biden, often without even voting down ballot. The ballots, which are forensically legitimate, given that they come from the same print shop as the good ballots, then get trucked into Pennsylvania and mailed. Hundreds of thousands. Keep in mind, Bethpage is where the truck driver Jesse Morgan's trailer got loaded with about 200,000 completed ballots with return addresses filled in. And Jesse drove his tractor trailer to Pennsylvania. Because these ballots were printed by a legal ballot printing company, it is difficult to tell from the printing quality that the ballots could be fraudulent. The only way to tell is to check the signatures, which was demanded repeatedly by the Trump team. The only solution for such ballots is checking signatures, but many swing states refuse to implement it strictly. As described in Jesse Morgan's testimony, these filled-in ballots were trucked to Pennsylvania and then disappeared. According to the testimony of Nathan Pease of Wisconsin, these hundreds of thousands of ballots must have entered the U.S. voting system through the U.S. postal system. Patrick Byrne continued in his tweets, quote, "We have all of that documented. Text, statements, affidavits, everything. We also know that this same ballot printing company and other firms in the same family also print for Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia." Patrick Byrne also said he found the second path of providing the blank ballots for election fraud. It was manufactured and shipped from China. He said in his tweets, last Wednesday, December 30th, the Georgia Senate Judiciary voted to inspect those Fulton County voting operations. Hours later, an Enterprise van pulled up and got filled up with voting materials. A shredding company in neighboring Cobb County, Georgia, was on December 31st given roughly 3,000 pounds of ballots to shred. Authorities have come into possession of those materials. A handful of papers stuck to the side of the shredding bin. They include some unshredded ballots. Also, a shipping receipt from the Chinese firm that printed the ballots in Chinese. Now, to answer some questions that might come up, last night in Cobb County, Georgia, some shredded ballots were in the hands of law enforcement. DHS agents shifted through and found Chinese shipping receipt and unshredded ballots, already confirmed counterfeit. Byrne also mentioned word is the DOJ and DHS have been told to stand down, that President Trump himself has had to call agents on the ground asking them to continue. So let's see how all this plays out in Georgia's runoff Senate elections and the joint sessions of Congress tomorrow. And speaking of the counting of Electoral College votes, I will be in D.C. tomorrow, bringing you live updates from the Capitol, along with Joshua Phillip, host of Crossroads. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.